am a military brat, one of 7 kids. I always like to say that a middle child always has the ability to compromise and cooperate, because otherwise you just wouldn't survive that. My parents taught us to love and honor our country and to be actively involved in our communities. And I have a history of being actively involved in my community. I have been a precinct captain in the Langley area for over 17 years. Margie Vanderhey and Pam Danner kind of dragged me into it. I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for Charlie Wilson and handled defense appropriations and foreign affairs. I worked at USAID, handling legislative affairs for USAID under Bill Clinton, or President Clinton, and I was appointed a senior advisor on international trade issues at the Department of Commerce. I'm a small business owner, very small. It's really small. And I build legislative strategies for companies and help them navigate the political system. I have 4 kids of my own and married a guy with 2 more, so we have raised 6 kids, 1 boy and 5 girls. I strongly support women's issues, because you can't have all those girls and not do that.
Okay. For District 35, Leanne Levin.
Well, hello. Thank you for coming on this rainy night. My name is Leanne Lapine-Luce. I just was married this summer, so new last name. My family's been here for 4 generations, so the Lapine family is a standard here. So thank you very much for having me tonight. I want to thank Ms. Knight for coordinating this really nice event. I really appreciate being here. The reason why I wanted to jump in this race was because I believe in creating a better future for our children and our children's children. I know all of you have families and you want to see your families do well. If you're like me, that's what we want, is we want to have a bright and beautiful future for our families. And right now is the time to start doing that. So right now is the time to create more jobs. I know Virginia's doing well in the area of jobs. However, shutdown, sequestration, all sorts of things happening that are out of our control. We need to keep pushing in that area of innovation and creating more opportunity for our children and our kids to do well. So with all that said, just a little background about me. I went to Virginia Tech for my undergraduate and graduate degrees. I have a background in defense, contracting work, and I'm involved in my church and also a secretary on the Consumer Protection Commission. It's a board in the Fairfax County area. We make decisions on issues for the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County, essentially protecting consumers' rights and making sure you are protected from faulty and not good businesses. So thank you for your time. Have a nice night.
Thank you very much. Next, from District 86, Jennifer Boysko.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm Jennifer Boysko. I'm your Democratic candidate from the 86th District, and I'd love to see a show of hands. Who lives in the 86th District here? Great. Well, I hope to earn your support on November the 5th. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My father, an Episcopal priest and strong Democrat. My mother, a nurse and a strong Republican family, had us. And you can imagine the conversations we had around the dinner table when we were kids as we discussed politics and social policy. I was raised with a strong sense of social justice and have spent really my entire life working to try to make my community a better place. Most recently, I've worked for John Faust, the Drainesville District Supervisor, as his aide, and I've actually worked very closely with AARP and groups of seniors, helping them as they decided how to age in place. That's something that I've really enjoyed doing and would like to continue working on that. I'm the mother of 2 teenage daughters, and women's issues and women's health are something that I care very deeply about and will stand up and be a consistent voice for that. I also am running because as I have watched the General Assembly over the past decade, we have seen it move further and further and further to the right. And the moderates have not stood up to do anything about it. We see what's happened now with the shutdown. The moderates are now, their hands are tied, and people are hurting. As I go out canvassing, I'm talking to, having conversations with voters who are frustrated and angry and feeling like they're not being listened to. And I think it's time for a change. My name again is Jennifer Boysko. My website is my name, jenniferboysko.com. And I ask for your vote on November the 5th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, also from the 86th District, Thomas Rust.
Brent and Jennifer ask you a question. I'll ask you one. How many here are not already committed? No hands went up. I'm Tom Rust. I'm in my 6th term in the House of Delegates. I serve on 4 committees: Science and Technology, Transportation, Education, and Commerce and Labor. The Speaker just announced a couple days ago I would be the chairman of Transportation when we go back. I'm also the co-chairman of the entire Northern Virginia delegation. I share that with Senator Colgan from Prince William County, and I am the chairman of the Joint Commission on Technology and Science. I have worked in the 12 years that I have been there primarily on 3 main areas: transportation, education, and jobs in the economy. I think the work we've done has been, I do say we, the work we have done has been pretty good. We have the 4th best K through 12 system in the nation. We just were ranked by the college boards who did the SATs. We did better than the nation, better by 4 points in reading, 1 point in math. The rest of the nation was flat. On jobs in the economy, Forbes just again ranked us number 1 in the nation for the best place to do business. And on transportation, I need not tell you, the General Assembly, in a bipartisan way, and I was a patron of that bill, did come together and finally, after 27 years, pass a comprehensive transportation plan which will fix the roads and our transportation, our multimodal system over the next generation, 10 to 15 years. Again, my name is Tom Rust. I look forward to your questions, and I hope to continue serving you in the General Assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the sheriff candidates. First up, Stacy Kincaid.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy Kincaid, and I am a 26-year veteran of the Fairfax Sheriff's Office. After my graduation from college, I began my career in law enforcement, and I am currently serving in the rank of captain. So how, as sheriff, will I move the agency forward? To begin with, Fairfax County is a very diverse county, and the sheriff's office in Fairfax is the largest in Virginia. We must respect and reflect that diversity. As an elected officer, the sheriff is in a unique position to cultivate and establish relationships with residents. I plan to establish volunteer outreach groups within the ethnic communities because I believe in working collaboratively with residents to create safer communities. Second, I have a long history of reaching out and working collaboratively with many groups. As your sheriff, I will be out in the community listening and learning. I was the recipient of the Outstanding Performance Award for my leadership as our agency's first occupational health and safety officer and peer support coordinator. I also am a graduate of Leadership Fairfax, and I sit on the governing board to prevent and end homelessness. I am also the recipient of the Sheriff's Office's Distinguished Service Award, which is the highest award given by the Sheriff's Office. And finally, in this economy, the sheriff must ensure that the taxpayers' money is being spent wisely. So as your sheriff, I will review all contracts, practices, and procedures to find greater efficiencies. And I'd just like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this event. I also want to thank our Fairfax County Deputy Sheriff's Coalition, SEIU 512, the Fairfax County Professional Firefighters and Paramedics, Local 2068, as well as Supervisor Kathy Hudgens, Senators Chap Peterson, Janet Howe, Mark Herring, and Delegates Mark Keem, Ken Plum, and the Democratic members of the Fairfax School Board, including Pat Hines and Ryan McElveen. I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Next, Brian Wolf.
My name is Brian Wolf, and I'm running for the sheriff of Fairfax County. A lot of people basically do not know what the sheriff's department does. They're basically in one building. They're a strong component of law enforcement, though. The face of the law enforcement is basically what you usually see is Fairfax County Police. But the extra component of watching the inmates, watching this courthouse and serving civil process is the courthouse, I believe, is the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department. They're a unique set of law enforcement officers. They really don't basically care to be seen out there. I disagree with my opponent. The outreach programs are fine when you're in an economy that's striving. Right now, we don't have a lot of money. We're cutting positions. We're cutting projects. What we have to do is focus what's inside. What I'd like to do is find money to add videotape to the courthouse. And the inside, or the courthouse apparently does have it. I want to add videotape inside the correctional office or correctional facility. It's the only correctional facility that I know that doesn't have videotape. We're the wealthiest county in Fairfax County. I think we should have it. Mental issues is now plaguing the community right now. It's plaguing the sheriff's department. Not by their fault. The sheriff's department employees are basically going to have to deal with mental illness in the people that are just visiting the courthouse and the people that are being arrested. We need to increase their training. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Kings Park West, started in 1970. I left for the Air Force in 1981. In 1985, I came back out of the Air Force. The very first house I bought was on Breton Court here off Glade Drive in Reston. Two-time winner of the Fairfax Police Officer of the Year. That's a wife with 5 kids, and 5 kids. I'm sorry, and I hope to have your vote and endorsed by the Police Benevolent Fund. Thank you.
Has Christopher DiCarlo arrived yet? Uh-huh. Okay. Well.
Hello. Good evening. I'm going to represent the independent perspective. I run as an independent. I've been running now for about 4 years, and nobody ever pays attention to the independents. So I started rapping 2 years ago. And so I'm going to... Thursday I put up my latest rap, which is a Western genre, about a guy that wants to be sheriff so he can fight Big Brother. And I'm going to do the lyrics for you. I'm going to add a little bit of emotion this time compared to when I did it last time because I've got the microphone. And so anyway, here goes. And I don't have any music or anything. And there's parts that are missing, but you'll pick it up. I'm not with the party. I got my own voice. Don't vote to the left or right. You got a better choice. They're lying and cheating and putting us on hold, man. The power of the people's been dropped from the program. Honest everyday workers got to be in control, not the bankers and the brokers who were born without a soul. Now we're in a state of perpetual neglect caused by the greed of the crooks we elect. The sheriff's supposed to protect the Constitution, so why is he the problem and not the solution? I want to do more than just ride on the range and spit the truth from the street. I want to make change. Let's go to work, start catching these thieves. Nobody's checking them. They do as they please. Taking our hope and stealing our trust. Put a star in my chest and I'll shackle these mutts. They're shooting up the government every single day in back alley deals where the dough gets the sway. I'm not going to play the game the way they arranged it, but once I get elected, I'll damn sure change it. We need a jolt to the system like a sheriff that raps, a free-thinking guy that won't fall in the traps. Now, I have your attention. Your trust is what I need. I'll put the greater good first every time. That's how you lead. Tell all your friends to get in the mix. Get the word out and get it out quick. Grab everyone you know and get your vote down. All day Tuesday, there's going to be a showdown. Because we got the strength and we got authority. The rich and corrupt are the ruling minority. We figured this out. I know where they're hiding. I'll deputize the truth and we'll all start riding. Thanks.
Okay. Mark Keene, is he right?
In the building.
Okay. Mark Keene will be here momentarily. In the meantime, I will explain how the question and answers will work after the candidates have given their introductory remarks. We encourage you to ask questions from the audience. We do have a microphone we can pass, but if you're more comfortable with index cards, we also have index cards where you can write your questions. And we'll wait until Mr. Keem arrives. Here. Okay, great. Yes, great.
Oh, down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. Make your introductory.
Well, wow, this is an entrance. Well, first of all, good evening, everyone, and I really apologize for being late. Not only was there traffic and the rain, of course, but I had an event in my district of Tysons with some Korean War veterans, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with them, just because I had some great stories to share. And so, sorry for my lateness, but I wanted to just indulge some of the folks that really wanted to tell me about their war experiences, and I just couldn't walk away from that. First, let me thank the League of Women Voters for welcoming me and all of our candidates here. I especially want to welcome my opponent here, Leanne, who, good to see you. I haven't had a chance to meet her yet, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. I am Mark Keem. I have served in the General Assembly now for 4 years, starting in the 2010 cycle. I represent Tysons, and for your purposes, the town of Vienna, which is all 4 precincts, and a very small sliver, which now we call Madison, in the right next to Flint Hill area. And the rest of my district is Providence, and a little bit of Springfield. When I ran for office 4 years ago, I told every single voter I talked to, and I knocked on 10,000 doors, I told them that I'm going to focus on the most basic issues, which is transportation, education, jobs, keeping the economy, and taking care of the bread and butter issues. And for the last 4 years, that's exactly what I've done. Anybody can look at my record in terms of my voting, as well as the issues that I've cared about, the kinds of bills that I've introduced, and the types of issues that I've worked on that have been focused on helping transportation, solving our traffic mess here, making sure that our schools in Northern Virginia stay the best that it is, and also making sure that our economy stays as stable as it is. Now, the problem is we can't control what happens on the federal government side. And so if I have the honor of representing you again for the next 2 years in the General Assembly, one of the areas, in addition to those bread and butter issues, one of the areas I want to focus on is what do we do to create a new emerging industries and sectors that would be independent of what the federal government spends? Because in this area, we need to have other jobs that are not dependent on the federal government. So I'd be happy to elaborate on any of those questions. But again, I apologize for being late, and I look forward to meeting all of you and talking with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we still have Ken Plum, who has not arrived, and also Christopher. Here it is. Okay. Come on up to the microphone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ken Plum. It's my honor to represent the 36th Legislative District in the House of Delegates. You're now in the middle of the 36th Legislative District. I apologize for arriving late, but this is Reston Newcomers Night, the event up at the Reston Association, and I went first, I should say, to welcome newcomers to our community. And to you, oldcomers to the community, it's good to see you again. I am running for re-election this year. While I'm unopposed, I'm still actively campaigning because I very much want you to go to the polls, and I very much want to have you to vote for me. Your vote for me is an affirmation that what I'm doing is what you would want me to be doing. And what I'm doing is trying to stand up on some issues for which it takes some courage, some people say, and for which I think we need to address. I mentioned just a couple of those. One would be gun violence. Folks, this is out of hand. We've got to do something to end gun violence. We can do that while maintaining people's constitutional rights, and we can do it in a way that brings safety to our children and to our communities. Secondly, discrimination. We have a way in Virginia and too many places in this country of discriminating against people for various reasons, including their sexual orientation. We've got to get over that. I campaigned against the marriage amendment when it was on the ballot. I voted against it in the legislature. I voted against it when it was on the ballot, and I campaigned against it. I'm happy to say this community may have been the only community in Virginia that voted against the ballot. And so it's going to be the case now that I think that we will need to look at repealing that amendment to the Constitution. Third, I think we have to be concerned about our environment. It's not a very sexy issue for a lot of people to talk about, but the truth of the matter is climate change is such that we need to be concerned about that. Thank you for the support you've given me in the past. I'll ask you please to not only go to the polls on November 5th, but encourage your neighbors to do so. It's a very important election. While I'm unopposed, I would still seek your support. Thank you very much.
All right. Now let's move to our question and answer segment. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer your question, and if the candidate has a challenger here, that challenger will also have 2 minutes. So are there any questions for the candidates? Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask the sheriff's candidates how important they think it is in terms of experience to actually have worked in the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department, and if you haven't, wouldn't that require a ramp-up learning period? Wouldn't that really be a disadvantage for the residents? How would you overcome that?
I'm assuming, sir, you looked straight at me during that whole entire question.
Yeah, take the microphone.
Okay. The office of sheriff is a politician. It's an elected official. In the South, a person who has a small lawnmower business can actually run for sheriff. It's the people that he surrounds himself with. I do have a little bit of a knowledge about running the sheriff. I do have a lot of knowledge about empowering people to work around me. If I can get folks to buy into my system, there's already some fantastic folks that are already working there. They don't need that much motivation. I think what I bring to the sheriff's office is I'm new. I can affect change right away. Right now, I believe there's division right now. A lot of folks wanted Mark Seitz to win the primaries. A lot of people wanted Captain Kincaid to win. I'm the tiebreaker. Okay? Everybody starts and produces much faster and much harder when someone new comes into the organization. I plan on surrounding myself with experienced people that know how to run jails. I am basically the face of the sheriff's department, but no, do I know how to go ahead and check cell blocks? Do I know how to order food in this jail? No. The folks that are working there now, they know how to do it. All I got to do is motivate them and empower them, get them more interested in their job. I want to go ahead and transfer some of the leadership from me, or where it's been is at the top, transfer some of that leadership down, and basically formulate focus groups, design these focus groups and develop ways to do the job better, learn what the strengths and the weaknesses are of the sheriff's department. I can do that. The candidate that's always going to that's been there, and basically for 24 years, there's a sense of bias where they don't feel like they can approach someone that's been there for 24 years. I have a clean slate with everybody starting November 6th. Thank you.
I'm probably the best qualified because the sheriff is the person that needs to protect the Constitution. And to do that, you have to be independent. You can't be tied to a political party. The problem we have throughout the country is that the sheriffs are tied to political parties. And in that means they cannot make it so that the power of the people is maintained. The power of the people has been usurped by the political parties. And on the back of my flyer is a chart that explains this bypass, such that it's a quid pro quo situation where the special interests give money to the political parties, and then the political parties work out legislation to pay back the special interests. And so, even though the Constitution says that the people are the source of the power, we all know we're not. And even though the Constitution says the government's supposed to be for the common good, we know it isn't. We live here in Washington, D.C. We see it all the time. And so I'm the best qualified because I'm independent, and I want to protect the Constitution. I'll tell you a side story. In Delaware, last year, the General Assembly decided to take the power of arrest away from the sheriff in all three counties. They had a trial. They went to the Supreme Court in September. The decision was handed down on Tuesday. The Delaware sheriff will not be able to arrest someone. This is how Big Brother is able to slowly diminish your rights and take away the Constitution. And that's what my rap was about. It's that we need an independent sheriff. He is our only elected individual in law enforcement that will protect the Constitution without being compromised by the political parties. Thanks.
I completed my college internship. I started my college internship with the sheriff's office my junior year of college, and that's what sparked my interest in law enforcement. I've worked my way up through the ranks. I've earned the trust and the support of the staff. And just to backtrack on myself and Mark Seitz, that was my opponent in the primary. Mark is the interim sheriff. I am the new person, because I wasn't appointed to be the interim sheriff. I'm about change. I'm about moving our agency forward. And again, our agency is a model agency. We do a lot of great things, but there's always room for improvement. The other thing, as far as new, is that we've never had a woman run for sheriff in Fairfax County. So I'm not the same old status quo as my opponent seems to think that I am. Nevertheless, I have the experience, I have the training, I am in the senior leadership team. I have worked with many organizations to include the police department, fire department, other public safety entities outside of the state, the U.S. Marshals, gone to training with them. I understand our agency. I know what our deputies as well as our civilian staff expects. I know what our inmates expect. So having said that, and I'm the only one on the ballot that is currently in law enforcement, just starting my 27th year, so I'm very proud of that too. Thank you.
Now I have a question for the delegates. Parents with adult children with intellectual disabilities worry about what will happen to their children when they pass. What will you do to expand Medicaid waivers for community-based care? And let's start with District 34. Kathleen Murphy.
I serve on the Human Services Council, and I can tell you that this is an issue that we have been looking at. There are a lot of disadvantages that parents with adult children with disabilities run into, and that is because they aren't familiar with how to continue the services once the child is past the age of 21. We've been working very hard with community groups to see if we can help expand services and to clarify services and make them easier to use. I believe in Medicaid expansion, so I think that it will be helpful when we move in that direction. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and I'll answer it in two parts because I think the question was a little bit vague about Medicaid expansion, which is one separate question, and about IDDD waivers, which is another question, but they're related in terms of the funding sources. On the Medicaid expansion, as Kathleen just mentioned, the General Assembly ought to and should have expanded Medicaid fully the way the President and the Affordable Health Care Act would have allowed us to do so. Unfortunately, because of most people in the House of Delegates who opposed that bill, we ended up doing kind of a halfway job. So we created this thing called the Medicaid Improvement Reform Commission, which is part of the budget that passed in March. And what that commission does, with 5 members from House, 5 members from the Senate, is to decide whether enough reforms are in place before we can go fully into the expansion. Unfortunately, what we've been told by all the meetings and hearings that have happened so far is that the Commission will likely come out and say, no, we're not ready for that, which would mean that the question of really whether we expand or not Medicaid next year will come up to the new governor. I strongly support that. I think not only because of the economics, I'm sure you'll hear from other people, you can add 400,000 Virginians to the Medicaid pool that are now currently uninsured or are using your emergency rooms now for health care, which costs all of us as taxpayers money. But it's also money that we've already paid as taxpayers that will be coming back into Virginia, as opposed to other states that are also run by conservative Republican governors like Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, Florida. They're taking our taxpayer money. On the IDDD waiver aspect of it, we obviously need to do more. Every year, at the very end of the budget cycle, we negotiate, when we expand by maybe 30 slots, maybe 50 slots, but we have a long, long waiting list. In order for us to free up enough cash so that we can pay for those vulnerable citizens, we need to make sure that we're not spending money elsewhere. And one way to do that is, again, going back to the Medicaid expansion, we would be able to get about $500 million that come in from the federal side of taxes you and I have already paid. That money will help us offset and create more DDID waivers, and so I strongly favor that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I really appreciate your situation that you're in, whoever you are. My heart goes out to you, and I do not believe in expanding Medicaid at this point. I think we do need to look at the current program that we have right now and make very difficult decisions on how we need to spend money for the people. And so I would love to talk to you more afterwards if you have any questions for me specifically, so I could talk more directly with you, and so we can chat more about what it is that you're looking for specifically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. To save time, I will tell you that I agree with everything that Mark Keem said, but I'll also add that working for Supervisor Faust, I was the aide for Human Services and Health in that capacity. I worked very closely with families who were dealing with these issues specifically. And one of the things that comes to mind is the Northern Virginia Training Center and the whole situation around the possible closing of it. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at a hearing with the state commissioner talking with the families about what they were going to do, because the federal government has stated that there's not enough community capacity to house the families. These are the most vulnerable, most profoundly disabled people in our community. And they are saying that they must be moved into community-based care. Unfortunately, the IDD and the disability waivers are not sufficient to pay for the difference in the cost from living in the training center to living in a community-based home, even if there was capacity. So we're dealing not only with the absolute imperative to increase the waivers, but we're also needing to increase capacity for community-based services. Fairfax County has done an excellent job in enhancing, because the state has not come through with the money for them. So Fairfax County has found ways to help add services on top of what the state has been able to provide. But the state has to come through with the money, and I support that. Thank you.
On the Medicaid expansion, what the state has said is we will expand if certain reforms are made, which is what most states have said. And Arizona is a perfect example. They just got basically a block grant to do it. Now, I'm not saying that's what Virginia is going to do, but what I am saying is we will expand if we get appropriate reforms. I'm the guy with Dr. John O'Bannon that got that language in the budget. Had that not been in the budget, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So let's keep that in mind. On the IDDD waiver, I've been talking with the ARC of Virginia, and I think what needs to happen there is those need to be combined into one waiver. That will save a lot of money, a lot of paperwork. The community that is interested in ID and DD waivers are supportive of that. Virginia is right now doing a study to do that, and we think it will come back with that recommendation, and I will support that because it's the right thing to do. On the Northern Virginia Training Center, we're under a Department of Justice law to do something there. It's supposed to scheduled to close on July 1st of July in 2015. I think what will happen, and this is my opinion and no one else's, is it will be downsized and it will remain open in some fashion. We are trying to move a lot of those folks into the community, which is what the Department of Justice said we had to do. I think some of those folks are simply not capable. Their families don't want them to go into the community, and they don't want them to go to the other center, which is down in Chesapeake. So my prediction, and I hope I'm right, is a portion of the Northern Virginia Community Center will stay open. And I will also tell you that the House of Delegates has taken the lead on ID and DD waivers, and we have set a goal of eliminating the list in a 10-year period, and we set that about 4 or 5 years ago. Thank you very much.
The thought that we would not expand Medicaid is unconscionable. Medicaid expansion will bring in 400,000 uninsured poor people, many people of whom are working but can't afford insurance. I don't care what kind of reforms we need. We can work on reforms, but at the same time, we've got to get people under insurance. And that's the fair and the right thing to do. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you share that view, what I'd ask you to do is to join me, as we did this past session, in a letter-writing, email, telephone campaign among my fellow delegates and senators to make sure that happens. Last campaign, we were so successful that legislators tell me that they were accustomed to getting 50 emails on the issue, got 1,500, and 1,500 saying let's accept the federal expansion of Medicaid. It's something we need to do. We ought to do it. And the legislature, if they feel enough pressure from the people, will do. So I invite you to join with your faith communities, your organization, and your community to let the legislature know it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay.
My question is for the delegates. Can you please explain your positions on women's health issues and maybe try to distinguish yourself from your positions as opposed to your opponent's positions? Thank you.
You go first.
Sure. To your second part of distinguish myself, I can't do that for my opponent, but I'll speak for myself. I believe very, very strongly that the decisions of a woman as far as her health is concerned, including reproductive rights, should be left to the doctor, the woman herself, and of course her faith. And I don't think the government has very much role other than making sure that the general health, welfare, safety standards that are applicable to all other types of healthcare services ought to be there. The problem is that once people start talking about specific procedure, namely abortion, yet on both sides of the issue, people start getting their political partisan rhetoric up to a point where we stop thinking about what the issue really is. It's not an issue of whether you're for or against the procedure. It's a question of what the government's role is. I think the government has very limited role. And to be principled and philosophically pure, one has to say if the government has no role in regulating guns, then the government shouldn't have a role in regulating a woman's health, or government should have no role in regulating military, religion, or any other field. So I try to be as pure as possible in my philosophical principle way of thinking about it. In that context, the government should have limited role.
As I said, as the parent to 5 daughters, I strongly support women's rights. I really and truly believe that we shouldn't pass things like personhood that will eliminate women's right to certain kinds of birth control, because we all know that women use birth control or contraceptives for a number of real physical problems not related to not having children. I think that Mark is absolutely right. That our government seems to think that it's their responsibility to tell a woman about the decisions, her health decisions, that she can be making. and I think that's wrong. I think that we're very capable. I think that the government really needs to step back and allow women and their doctors to make their own decisions. I don't think we should be mandating, as my opponent has voted for, mandatory transvaginal ultrasounds. I think that's punitive and beyond belief. I believe that women's health issues have too many facets. I think closing the clinics across the state to deny women access to cancer screenings is atrocious. Again, I differ with my opponent on these issues strongly.
Well, I am pro-life, and I believe in creating a culture of life, and I believe it is the government's job to make a stand in that arena. And so I do believe protecting the life of the child is extremely important, and it is something that we need to do, and it's a principle that we should have. I agree. The procedure you mentioned is not necessarily what we need to be doing, but perhaps just a normal ultrasound would be enough information for a mother to have when she's choosing what to do with her unborn child. And so those are the principles that I stand for, and I believe the government does have a role in this. Thank you.
No, you're on the ballot ahead of me. That's the rule.
Thank you for the question. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm a mother of 2 teenage daughters. I'm the daughter of an Episcopal priest, and I'm on the Diocesan Council at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church also. So even with that, I am still strongly pro-choice. I believe it should come down to the mother, the woman, the gentleman, and their house of work, and their doctor. The government should have no place in this whatsoever, in my opinion. And I really resent, honestly, the fact that it's used as a political football. Not too long ago, the Assistant Majority Leader, Todd Gilbert, said on the floor of the House of Delegates that he thought that some people treated abortions as a lifestyle choice. And you know what? Not one Republican stood up and said anything. None of them challenged him. They didn't criticize him outright in that moment. If you elect me, I will stand firmly on those issues, and I will not waver. I will not give in to political pressure because I don't believe it's the government's place. And I also think that the TRAP bill is harmful because it hurts women who need cancer screenings, and I think we need to have access, and Planned Parenthood should be funded. Thank you.
I was there the day Todd Gilbert made that statement, and I think the people who are here will tell you that he stood up the next day and he apologized. So let's just keep that straight. This thing about voting against Planned Parenthood for the $200,000, which my opponent has mailed against me, you want to know the facts on that one? The $200,000 has been in the state health department since 2006, and it was put there by Delegate Margie Vanderhei, a Democrat from the McLean area, and all the bill wanted to do was move it from the state to Planned Parenthood. There was no reduction in the cancer or cervical screening. Look it up. It was in the budget bill. I voted against, contrary to what she has mailed you, the transvaginal ultrasounds. I can give you the bill, Barbara, and you know it. You know it very, very well. Look it up. That's absolutely untrue, and you know it. Ask the Women's Strike Force. asked NARL, whatever they call themselves. Ask them. Ladies and gentlemen, Roe versus Wade, whether you agree with it or not, is the law of the land, and I uphold the law of the land. Thank you very much.
I'll be brief. I am pro-life, and I will tell you that you will remember back at the beginning of this year, we were on the comedy hour just about every night with these bills. A bunch of old white men sitting around talking about what women should do about their reproductive rights is not right. We need to take a hard look at how people have been voting on these measures and vote accordingly. Virginia does not need this kind of reputation. It's not right for women. They need to be able to make a choice on their own. That's how I've consistently voted and how I'll continue to vote in the future. Thank you.
Now, does anyone have a question for one of the sheriff's candidates?
This gentleman was first.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
In Virginia, most sheriff's deputies do not have basic due process protections that police officers do. In Fairfax, we're very unique in that we have that through a signed memorandum of understanding with that each sheriff signs. The last few sheriffs, I think the last 3 or 4, have also signed that. So my question to the candidates is that this memorandum gives deputies the protection of not being fired without basic due process. It also allows them to agree to any discipline or anything else. So this is a simple yes or no question. On your first day of office, will you pledge to immediately sign the memorandum of understanding giving sheriff's deputies the basic due process protections that they have had for I don't know how long?
That's a question that I've already been on record, but I'm glad you brought it up. I do support and I will sign the civil service agreement because it does protect us from any kind of political interference or intervention and any kind of unjust firing. So it's important to our staff, it's important to their families, and lots of our staff, they may have the deputy or the civilian may be the only person that's working. So for someone not to come in and sign civil service is egregious. Thank you.
I would not sign the agreement. It's my understanding that the sheriff takes responsibility for the deputies. He or she takes personal responsibility for the deputies' actions. And so if you have someone in your department or you're in your office, to be correct, that you can't trust, I think that it's just not going to work. So my answer is no.
Sir, if you asked me to give you a yes or no question or an answer to that question, it would be yes. But I do want to elaborate on it. It's not going to be the day I walk into the sheriff's department. I'm going to consult with the county attorney, and I'm going to get his advice, and I can promise you it'll be signed. If the Commonwealth attorney and the county attorney meet with me on November 6th, it will be signed November 7th. So yes.
I have one written question here for the delegates. What is your position on car title loans? Okay, yeah, let's do that. That's great.
Predatory lending is out of hand in Virginia. You've got these car title lenders, you've got these cash checkers, and you've got these paycheck lenders. It's out of hand. You know, we're talking about rates of interest of excess of 300%. And these are rates of interest that are levied against people who are least able to afford it. People who go to payday lenders and who go to car tax lenders are people who are really down on their luck. It's a last resort. I've been working to try to encourage credit unions and banks to see if we can't come up with some kind of reasonable alternative. I understand sometimes that people need small amounts of cash, but this system is called predatory lending because that's what it is. It's feeding on the people who are most in need, and it's something that seriously needs regulation, and I would be supportive of regulating that industry.
When I worked for Supervisor Faust, one of the things that I covered was consumer protection, and that's something that I feel is a big issue also, especially with seniors. They need extra protection. We want to make sure that we're funding the AAAs and the older adults services appropriately. But I would also, as Ken said, would be interested in working with credit unions and small community banks to give people other options. I agree that predatory lending is wrong, and there's a lot of money that goes, that they're big donors to a lot of campaigns, and so there's a lobby to step up against, and I would not support them and their efforts. So I think we need to clamp down on it. Excuse me. Thanks.
On payday lending, either 2-3 years ago, we did significantly rewrite those laws. We did drop down the interest rates. We dropped down the number of loans. We dropped down the period of time between the loans. We ratcheted those down dramatically. And I am told, and somebody can check the facts on this, that we now have about a third of the payday lenders in Virginia that we used to have just because of these rules. Car title loans, I don't recall if we've seen any legislation on that. Now, maybe we have. I just can't recall it. I'm on Commerce and Labor where all that stuff comes. I don't recall seeing any car title loans, but I would certainly look at them. But we did stand up to the lobbyist and dramatically change the payday lending a couple of years ago. Thank you very much.
Well, in addition to what you've heard from the other candidates, I think we need to remember that predatory lending generally, whether it's by use of car titles or by home or pawn or anything else that people use, is not done across everywhere in Virginia. It's only done in some neighborhoods that are already faced with poverty, other issues. Up in this area, fortunately for a lot of us who live in this neighborhood, we have a very good quality of life. But we are blessed. But the rest of the Fairfax County, we're not. Mount Vernon, Route 1, further down, and especially around military bases down in Hampton Roads, we see a lot of predatory lending because they know, these guys who are in business know that they're only going to go after those people that are maybe less educated, unfortunately, less able to go and consult professionals. And so the root of solving it isn't just going after it legislatively, and we should. I mean, I thought we had a usury law, if not in code, at least in the Bible, that said that you shouldn't be charging people too much. But unfortunately, in Virginia, our rates have no ceilings. It can go up all the way up to, as Ken said, hundreds. And so in addition to fixing that part of the problem, which is by code regulating, limiting the amount of percentage they can charge and the time and the duration and the conditions, we also have to address the root cause, which is poverty, unemployment, education. So I think we have to look at it from a holistic perspective. It's not something we can solve overnight, but it's not something that legislature can do by ourselves. We need a partnership from the faith base, from the community, and everybody else who can really help us. Because in North Carolina and other places where you've seen a lot of military bases, they've really clamped down on this. And so this is a partnership that we also need to bring the Federal Consumer Protection Bureau, whatever the government agency is called, and bring them down as well so we can rely on the expertise of other states and how they've solved this problem. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I do agree that we need to keep an eye on how businesses like these that are handing out these car loans, that we need to keep an eye on that. I'm part of the Consumer Protection Commission currently in Fairfax County. That's what we do, is we keep an eye on businesses that are taking advantage of the elderly or the poor, and just other people that just aren't noticing that they're getting taken advantage of. And that is, I believe, the role of government is to protect the people, especially from faulty businesses. So when in the cases where we are, charging 300% or beyond, that is something we probably should have a say in, and I would look at that personally. So thank you.
I think it would be impossible to stand up here and say I'm for predatory lending. Of course, nobody is for predatory lending. I can tell you my mom was 91 when she died, and I can tell you that the last week of her life, some guy climbed on the roof of her house and insisted that she had ordered repairs to her air conditioner. And this was in August in Arizona. So when he broke it, we knew it almost right away. I absolutely support regulating predatory lending and preventing it from harming the elderly and the poor and the young and inexperienced. I just think it's terrible, and it gets people in a hole that it's really, really hard to ever get out of. So, yeah, I'll be right there with you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? You, sir,
I'd
you.
like to ask a question. In that material money walk, you could go into the internet.
She's bringing you a mic. She's bringing you a microphone. People can't hear you.
There's a book out on money walks, and also you can go into the web page and type in money walks, and the search engine will bring up the United States. Then you can click on Virginia, and you can click on the county. There's been $6 billion of adjusted gross income moving out of Fairfax County, since most of you people represent Fairfax County. Do you see that as a problem? And if you don't see it as a problem, do you see it as a good thing? And anybody, I just assume everybody answer. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm looking up Money Walks right now. What's that?
Money Walks.
MoneyWalks.com.
And it'll bring up the map of the United States, and you click on Virginia and then Fairfax County.
You want to take one?
Well, I'll just wing it, Mark, while you look up the facts. First of all, I'm not aware of that, and I really kind of find it, and Mark's going to tell me whether it's true or not, I find it a little hard to believe because Fairfax County and Northern Virginia are consistently attracting new businesses. I carried the legislation a couple years ago that got VW of North American here, 400 jobs, 100,000 salaries each. We've attracted SAIC, we've attracted Northrop Grumman, we've attracted Bechtel, big engineering firm. We've attracted the national headquarters of Hilton. The county is growing. So I don't know where that number comes from, but I find it hard to believe that we are losing money in Fairfax County just by the number of people that are coming here looking for jobs. Now, Mark, you can correct everything I've said now.
It might be difficult. I'm getting like a personal finance advice page.
Okay, when you get home, type in Money Walks, and a map of the United States will come in. Click on Virginia, and then click on Fairfax County.
Well, Fairfax is the second wealthiest county in the nation, Loudoun being number one. I don't know, maybe all the rich people are leaving. I don't know.
Does anybody else want to address that issue? No? Okay. I think they feel they don't know enough about it. Yes?
Yes, I have a question in the mental health area, and this is addressed to the Office of the Sheriff, because that office has somewhat become the fallback provider for mental health care in our area for many years. Could you briefly explain what the program is and the staff training for handling mental health issues in the jail currently, and are there any? Do you have any suggestions for improvement? Thank you.
That subject continues to be a very serious subject, and it's one that I'm very passionate about. I can tell you that in our facility, we have members of the Community Services Board, which consists of psychologists as well as psychiatrists. We have staff from our medical section as well as deputies that receive training, and it's ongoing training. And again, the jail has continued to be the default healthcare provider for the mental health community, and that's something that I plan on working on in terms of, I've spoken to a few other people that are working on this too as far as this legislation. I don't make the laws, but I certainly can enforce them. And we've talked about establishing some type of program where once an individual gets out, there's somewhat of a case tracking position, and again, it's volunteer. It's not something that's going to cost us money because we do have a lean budget, but still, mental health continues to be our primary, our primary concern. I can tell you that once an individual comes in, they are carefully screened. We have folks that are trained in terms of classifying them. They're not thrown into areas that can be an insane asylum. They are kept safe, and although it's a default, the jail's a default, it's a double-edged sword because at least the individual is getting the medical attention that they need. They're getting fed 3 meals a day. They're getting mental health treatment, and they're able to, talk one-on-one with psychologists. And certainly, if they need to see a psychiatrist, they're evaluated appropriately. But again, it's something that continues to be ongoing, and we are going to continue to work on it. But our deputies get lots of training, not only when they start the academy or go to the academy, but also throughout their training, their mandatory in-service training every year. Thank you.
Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I sure wish you've been asking that question about 5 other League of Women Voters forums, because that's my whole platform. I entered this race late. The reason I entered the race late is because my opponent didn't even address it in 2 forums, a debate with her Mark Seitz or the primary. She hasn't mentioned it one time. I could speak not 2 minutes on this, but I could speak 2 days on this. Fairfax County lost $16 million for community treatment centers for the mentally ill. Yes, you put it perfectly, ma'am. I can't remember what it was, but you said we're basically housing. It's a warehouse. It's the largest Fairfax County mental health or the mental health facility, probably in the state of Virginia. If the mental illness is basically being transferred into the county jail, don't we need to make sure they have the most up-to-date, most proven training in the world? I'm prepared to introduce and find training money or budget money to implement a crisis intervention team-based training model. I've contacted, I can't see you, so I don't want to look around you, but I've contacted the Community Services Board, which is the in-house psychiatric treatment center. I've been in close contact with those folks. They say they do have something in place now, but they do agree with me we need the crisis intervention team-based model. They said they have something. They said they don't know what it's called. I said, is it in the general orders that I can look it up? And he said he doesn't think so. I said, is there a name for this training? He said, no, there isn't. I don't know what kind of training my opponent's talking about, but I wish I'd give her 5 more seconds of my time if she could just tell me what the name of it is.
I don't have anything to add.
Do I have 5 seconds to say something? Because I do have something to add.
Okay, if he said he can have 5 seconds this time, he can have 5 seconds.
Actually, the type of training that my opponent is speaking of is something that is taught at our academy. We have a lesson plan that it's been implemented. But what I will say about this training, it is, we've looked at it before, and it's something that for a police officer on the street, probably more effective just because The police officer is dealing with one-on-one, whereas in the jail we have a controlled environment. So again, it's something we've already looked at. We are looking at additional training, and we do welcome the opportunity to do additional training, but we've already had this crisis intervention training. So thank you.
Does it?
I appreciate the fact that that question was directed to the sheriff candidates and their efforts to respond to it, but let me tell you, it ought to be directed to the delegate candidates. Mental health programs in Virginia are grossly underfunded. That's why the jailhouse turns out to be the default position. There's a practice in Virginia in many localities. Thank God it's not so much in Fairfax, because Fairfax supplements the state monies for mental health. There's a practice called streeting. And streeting means that once you get someone who should be put into a mental health facility and you can't find a slot, you put them back on the street. And when you put them back on the street, they get in trouble, so the sheriff picks them up and they end up in the jailhouse. That's not a good practice. That's not something we want to continue. The question ought to be to the delegates, would you be willing to support them? We can't afford a tax cut. Thank you.
Would any of the other delegate candidates care to address the mental health issue?
Virginia is the 8th richest state per capita in the entire country and ranks near the very bottom in the investment we make in mental health services. We can do better than that. If I'm elected, I will make that a top priority to help find the funds for that, because we all have people who are suffering in our families, whether they're mentally ill, whether they have drug and alcohol problems. We know that this is a problem, and it's something that I would be committing to. Thank you.
Does anyone else care to address this issue, or should I move on? Okay.
Well, I actually thought it was out of line, since it wasn't asked to the delegates for a delegate to come up and make a speech. But I'm just an invited guest. This year's budget, and you can all check it because I probably won't have the numbers exactly right, but we put an extra $500,000 in training of our law enforcement officers to recognize mental health issues so they don't go to the jail right off the bat. We also put an additional $600,000 into mental health training. Is it enough? No. Is it enough for transportation? No. Is it enough for education? No. Is it enough for public services? No. Is it enough for libraries? I mean, go right down the list. You guys have to help us make those tough decisions. Let me tell you, I've made a lot of tough decisions, and so has every delegate up here. I've got the scars on my back from the 2004 vote. I've got the scars on my back from the transportation vote. It's tough down there. It's very tough. It takes leadership. It takes people like some of us who will lead on issues and do the right thing. Mental health needs more money. Everything needs more money. But are you all and everybody else, the other 8.1 million Virginians, willing to pay more? That's the big question.
Are there any other questions?
We've had one down here for a while.
Oh, okay. We'll take you, sir, in the orange shirt.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, an article today in the Fairfax Connection stated that you're going to donate your salary for your first term to charity. If that's true, I wish my name was Charity, but what dollar figure is that, and do you have a charity already picked out that you would do that should you become our next sheriff, sir?
I basically forget to mention that each time, but my campaign team keeps on telling me, you need to remember that, you need to remember that. Like I said, I got into this race late, because basically I did want Mark Seitz to win. When he didn't win, and I found out there was going to be absolutely no discussions about mental health, about video cameras being entered in the courthouse, and that it looked like we were going to basically focus on outreach programs to improve diversity with the Sheriff's Department. I didn't think that was the direction, this forward that Captain Kincaid's talking about. We have internal issues. We don't have deputy issues. We've got internal issues that we can't overlook. Mental health is a community problem. It's not the deputy's problem. I'm retired for a year after 26 years of law enforcement. I'm doing fine on my $78,000 retirement. I'm okay. I've survived 1 year on it. I really don't need the $160,000. I just want to make a difference. Vote me in for 2 years. If you guys want to vote in another candidate because I couldn't get the things that I wanted done, well, then basically I'm willing to go ahead and try to survive the election. But I don't need the money. What I want to do is just take 2 more years and try to help this community. And most people want to call it a gimmick. Oh, I forgot to mention, I've got an appointment with the director of Fairfax CASA tomorrow. I've had ideas of having Democrats and Republicans come together and try to determine if they can work bipartisan and come up with some strategies on where it could go. I don't really care. I just want it to be in Fairfax County. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask the delegates what your position is on gun violence.
I lost my brother when 2 robbers entered his place of business, and after they robbed him, they murdered him. I think it's really, really important for us to come together as a community and recognize that there is a growing problem of gun violence. I think that we need not to be intimidated by the larger forces that are out there. I think we really do need to kind of develop a sense of determination that we have a right and an obligation to talk about how we can protect our children and our communities from gun violence. Of course, we all support the Second Amendment, but I think it actually means something different to each and every one of us, and that's hard to navigate. But I can tell you that we've seen Newtown and Aurora and the Navy Yard, and mental health is part of the problem, and we need to come together and not be bullied and have this conversation and really, really push to get sensible gun safety regulations put in place. And I vote for expanding background checks. So thank you.
The very specific question was, what's your position on gun violence? Obviously, I think it's horrible. And I would like to make sure that it doesn't happen, but the reality is it does happen. So the question really, I think, rephrasing your question is, what's the government's role? What can we as state delegates do, elected officials do to stem gun violence? I think every time we have these conversations, we have some people in this room who are Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberal, independents. I think depending on where you sit in that political box, you start with talking points, you start with bumper stickers, you start with slogans. I think it really helps with this conversation to take all that away and focus on what's the government's role. And if I can spend just a couple minutes explaining, and I'll tell you exactly where I stand on that. The Second Amendment is the law of the land. It's been the law forever, and it will remain the law of the land. And the way the Supreme Court has interpreted it, there are some limits on what the government, the state, can do to regulate. And so there are 2 main areas that the state has responsibility. One is the purchase, the sale portion. How does a gun get into the stream of commerce? How does that actually end up in the public? And that's the sale. There are limits that the government can place in that sale. So the types of products, the types of ammunition, how many, the quantity, when, how, who buys it, and what the conditions are for purchasing. I think that as citizens as well as lawmakers, we should make that as tough and tight as possible so that those people that should not qualify, mental health, criminal background checks, underage kids, all those things that we just as a society believe are not people that should be walking around with inherently violent weapons should not have that. So everything we can do to tighten that would involve things like background checks, gun show loopholes, ammunition, et cetera, et cetera. And I would be voting for restrictions. On the other side of it is once a person, a gun owner, a legally, lawfully gun owner possesses the gun, whether it's concealed carry or open, what do we, the government, do to make sure that they use it properly, responsibly? And in that world, I think that we need to provide as much freedom as possible for the legitimate gun owners who've gone through the background checks, who've gone through the criminal backgrounds, who've paid their dues to be able to carry that gun and to use it in a responsible way. And that's up to each individual citizen. The government can't come in there and teach them how to use that gun. I think that individuals have to be responsible. Thanks.
Yes, I agree. Obviously, violence and gun violence is a horrible crime that does happen. And unfortunately, I think the issues that we're having in schools and elsewhere is a travesty and something that we need to do everything we can to help protect the people. And so I don't agree with restricting gun sales. However, I do believe we should make sure there is a background check in there. Any criminal background investigation should be cleared first before a person purchases a gun. So, thank you.
The question was gun violence. What do you think we should do about it? We've watched children being murdered in Connecticut. We've watched the movie theater being blown up in Aurora, Virginia Tech. We could go on and on. In all of those mass shootings, there were mental illness issues that were behind them. In fact, the gentleman who just was at the Naval Yard, it turned out that he had mental issues also, but he was actually screened, from what I understand. He had a legal gun that he bought here in Fairfax County. He passed a screening for mental illness, and he had an ID to get on base. So what do? I think we need to continue the conversation as a community, and we all need to make some tough decisions. Obviously, I like the other, Mark Keem, believe that background checks are essential. I think we need to reduce the capacity for the magazines and high-capacity rifles. I don't think a regular person needs them in their house. I understand there are people who hunt and who are sportsmen, and I certainly respect that. My brothers are both two of those kinds of people. But that's my opinion. Thank you.
It's a tough issue. There are no easy answers. I wish there were. If there were easy answers, we probably wouldn't have some of the issues we do. I think I'm right in this. I've cast about 25,000 votes in 12 years, 25 to 30,000. The one vote that I can recall that got to the floor of the House of Delegates, which I voted on, was to overturn Governor Wilder's one gun a month bill from 20 years ago, plus or minus. Ken, you were probably there when that was done. I thought that law worked. I thought it had been effective. It had done the things that Governor Wilder had said it should do. It had cut down on the sale of guns here going to New York and other places like that. So I voted against eliminating the one gun a month rule. That passed anyway. I will say that I have gone on record. One of the issues that comes to the General Assembly never comes to the floor, but people talk about it, is the gun show loophole. I have said that I would support that. I will say in defense of Virginia, the Navy shooter tried to get a high-capacity automatic weapon and was turned down in Virginia. He was turned down. He did get the shotgun, of course. I will say also after the Virginia Tech tragedy, and one of my degrees is from there, we did significantly change the mental health rules and laws and requirements, and a lot more conversation goes on between the high schools and the colleges about the mental state of the young people who come there. So I think we helped in that area. I guess what I would leave you with is the one vote that I can recall that has come to the House of Delegates floor on guns. I've told you how I vote. Most of them go to police, militia, and public safety, and they never come out of there.
First of all, let me sincerely apologize for jumping up on that sheriff's question. I guess get so excited on some of these issues.
You're on the floor.
I know, just like I'm popping up on the floor. I sent in my earlier comments my concern about gun violence. And my real concern is that we're getting numb to this. We're getting so many of these incidents happening. You know, the first one happened about 50 years ago. 20 years later, another happened. And now we've had about half a dozen in the last 2 years. We're getting numb to gun violence, and that's not good. So I go over to the NRA headquarters the 14th of every month. That's the anniversary of Newtown, to try to keep alive the notion that we need to do something about gun violence. We need to do a number of things. We got to tighten up our background checks. Too many possibilities for purchasing a gun without going through a background check. Secondly, we have to ramp up the information that we have on those who are mentally ill so that those background checks can include the mentally ill. And secondly, we got this Second Amendment, that's true, but you don't need any high-capacity guns like we're talking about selling to people now. And the amount of ammunition that some of these people are buying, that should be put a stop to. And that's the kind of things I'll be working on to do this session. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No other questions. We did have a request for a follow-up.
Okay.
I'll follow up because Mr. Wolf, you said yes, and then you elaborated on something. And this is an issue that concerns everyday line staff deputy sheriffs. Until civil service is signed by you after consulting with the county attorney, Commonwealth, whoever you want, will you ensure that no deputy is subject to any discipline or termination until they have due process actions?
Yes.
Are there any other?
No other questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to follow up a comment from Delegate Rust, who invited all of us to, tell the members of the General Assembly that yes, we would be willing to pay more for these services. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. It's a little bit difficult because we have been telling them. I mean, a lot of us have been writing letters and emails for years. But one of the problems seems to be we don't seem to have many people from many delegates from Northern Virginia on the Appropriations Committee in the House. What could you do as far as trying to get finally some Northern Virginians onto the Appropriations Committee to solve some of these funding problems that we have?
I'll volunteer, sir.
Well, as much as I would like to tell you that us delegates control that, we don't. The Speaker of the House makes all appointments. He appoints people to all the committees. We all probably volunteer for various and sundry committees. But and I don't want to be the wonk here tonight, but the Appropriations Committee doesn't set tax policy. It's the Finance Committee. So if you want to set tax policy, you got to get people on the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee will have a new chairperson, and the number 2 person on that, at least today, is a Northern Virginia delegate, and I don't remember who the rest of them are. Huh? Yeah, Delegate Hugo from down Springfield. That doesn't say he's going to be the chairman, because the Speaker makes those appointments. But the Finance Committee sets the tax policy. I mean, the joke in the General Assembly is the Finance Committee sets the taxes, and then the Appropriation Committee gets all the fun of spending the money.
Yes, would anyone else like to?
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
I have written to all the members of the Medicare, the commission that's studying Medicaid, and I got back an answer from one person saying that he would consider accepting Medicaid expansion if there were reforms. And I've been looking for reports on what these reforms are supposed to be, and I don't know what reforms are being proposed that Medicaid needs in Virginia before anybody can accept the federal funding. Do the delegates have an idea of what reforms are being looked for?
I don't know why everybody points to me. The governor, and I think everybody in the assembly has said, we are willing to expand Medicaid if we have substantial reforms. Dr. Hazel, who I think most everybody up here would agree is doing a fabulous job pushing the information out. I'll give you a perfect example. He was successful of getting Medicaid and Medicare combined into dual enrollees. Huge issue. We've been working on it for years. Saves us about $30 million a year. There are a whole bunch of others. I can't remember them all, but there's no bill on this, by the way. It's all in the budget, and it's all budget language. But there are things in there like wellness. There are things in there like managed care. There are things in there like healthy habits. But I think Virginia has a good chance, I'm not on the committee, has a good chance of accomplishing this, and I'll tell you why. The former Secretary of Health and Human Resources in Virginia is now the person in the federal government that we're working with. She knows Virginia. She knows what we're trying to do. There also have been estimates, and I'm just repeating numbers, that 30% of Medicaid money is lost in unnecessary medical tests, fraud, treatments that are not needed. All those kind of things are all rolled into it. And there are three major steps that this committee is looking for. But I will tell you, and I'm running out of time, but nobody else seems to want to say anything here because we're all being recorded by my opponent, which I always appreciate. Thank you. Good to see you. I lost my train of thought. What Virginia is trying to do, I think, is the right thing. But I will tell you, when I got home tonight, I had a recorded message saying, go to Richmond and go to the public hearing, which I think is tomorrow, but don't hold me to that, and speak out against this. These public hearings, of which I have not been to, hundreds of people show up in opposition. How many of y'all have gone down there in support? That is a rhetorical question.
Thank you very much.
Well, as somebody who voted for expansion without any more conditions, barriers, obstacles, etc., I'm not sure why the commission was even set up, because I frankly thought that we were ready to accept that. Virginia is already 47th in our Medicaid spending for a state that's 8th wealthiest in the country. I think there's a little bit of a mismatch there in terms of how much we spend for the most vulnerable among us. So I was ready to take those reforms. Virginia uses 138% federal poverty rate as our cutoff. The federal government, under the health care bill, has that plus a few other conditions as well. But just as a matter of public service here, if you all want to go to a website, and unfortunately I couldn't find yours, but I found this one, MIRC, that's Medicaid Improvement Reform Commission, MIRC.virginia.gov. You'll find all the information, including all the hearings that Tom DeRuss is talking about, all the insights and the members and what they're talking about, and it'll tell you exactly what those reforms are. Now, I've joked that MIRC is pronounced Merck, so this is a very murky process, and I hope that we can resolve it soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Are there any more? Yeah, there's one.
Real quick, I think I found the website the gentleman is talking about. Real quick, and the thesis of this apparently is if the state has a low tax, everyone's going to move out of their state to your state. And I'm pretty sure I'm reading the map correctly. It says Virginia actually gained $2 billion.
No, Fairfax County.
Okay, but the whole state gangs with the...
I said Fairfax County.
Okay.
This is a very short question. All I need is a yes or no answer, I guess, from the delegates. Just let us know, do you endorse and support the top of your ticket, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Attorney General? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, for Terry McAuliffe, just to clarify. I'm on the Democratic ballot.
Yes, Terry McAuliffe, Alf Northam, and Mark Brown.
Yes.
Yes.
Terry McAuliffe, Ralph Northam, Mark Brown.
Yes.
This is for Mr. Wolf. At the Braddock League of Women Voters, you were emphatic that you would not sign the civil service agreement, and tonight you're saying you would sign it. So I'd like to know what the change is.
Can you tell me what I said then, ma'am?
You had a long exchange with people saying that you believe the sheriffs in the department were full of crooks and thieves, and you were not going to sign the civil service agreement until you had an opportunity to open their internal affairs files and review them and clean out all the people who were tarnishing the badge. And that you had a long colloquy with someone from the audience about due process. And you said in the exchange with him, you kept asking questions like, do you want someone next to you in the job who, is a thief? And you, last night or the night before, you said you now thought there were only a couple of bad apples or bad eggs in the sheriff's department, and now you're saying you'll go along with the civil service agreement. So I'm wondering where you started saying no, and now you're ending up saying yes. So I'm wondering what the thought process is. How did you get to the yes tonight when you had started with the no?
Okay. I think that's a little bit exaggerated. I've always said there's only about 2 or 3 bad eggs. I've discussed with the deputies that after these briefings. I think they know that we're talking about 2 or 3. When you sign civil service agreement, you're giving protection to good employees. It also gives protection to bad employees. The sheriff's office, by code, doesn't have anything unless they get civil service protection. The police officers get the Police Officer Bill of Rights. They have to have civil service. If for some reason any of you deputies think that I'm going to proceed and be sheriff, where you're not going to have the same Bill of Rights as your counterparts in law enforcement, please come see me at the end. You need civil service. If I was going to be a deputy, I would want civil service. I'm talking about I need, and I think what any sheriff should do is consult with an attorney, not my own. I'm choosing the county attorney. I'm choosing the Commonwealth attorney. Let me know what I can do. If I can't do anything, ma'am, I just told you here, November 7th. Why did I pick November 7th? Hopefully I can get in office November 6th and meet with those 2 gentlemen. That's all I'm saying about it. Does anybody from the Sheriff's Department have any concerns that good employees are going to get fired by me? I've assured you good employees. There's good employees in this room. I've been approached by deputies that there is about 2 or 3 that shouldn't be there. I hate to come over. My campaign manager says you have to be well liked. But I hate that the entire forums, and Peggy Knight will agree with this, the delegates that show up here, this is basically a persecution of Brian Wolf. They don't get to speak on several issues, and we don't talk about the issues. Basically, what we have to do is just basically attack Brian Wolf all night. And this is basically the most mild-mannered night we've had. My opponent over here, Mr. DiCarlo, said just tonight, just about 20 minutes ago, he said, it looks like you're going to get off easy tonight. Okay? Why would my opponent say that? I'm pretty sure that there's lots of deputies that could ask their captain the same questions.
Maybe you can take this up afterwards.
I apologize to the Democrats. I mean the delegates. I'm not going to. Delegates.
Any other questions? Okay, we will have some time because we don't have to be out of here till about 9:15, so you will have some time for one-on-one with the candidates. I would like to thank very much my moderator, Helen Kelly. I want to recognize all the efforts that the ARP Dulles Area Chapter 4681 did to help this become a success. They were tremendous at advertising it, helping get venues set up. They really worked very hard on it. Coffee, tea, cookies, and I think there's still some cookies left, are all due to AARP. And I thank all of the candidates for coming out night after night for the meet and greets, and all of you folks for coming here. Thank you very much.